Hi, everyone. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We're glad to have you with us for today's presentation featuring Adrian Jennings, Chief Product Officer at Cognosis. Adrian will discuss the transition from the bulky, problematic RTLS systems that once dominated the market to the lightweight wireless versions in service today. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Cognosis. Cognosis's revolutionary approach to the RTLS asset tracking enables room-level asset tracking accuracy with minimal upfront investment. By leveraging low-energy Bluetooth and combining it with our patented AI-powered location engine, Cognosis delivers an ultra-lightweight footprint that can be deployed without entering patient rooms or disrupting clinical operations with the accuracy required to deliver a documented ROI. For more information, please visit cognosis.com. A few announcements before we get started. We're already planning the 2022 MD Expo in Atlanta. MD Expo strives to provide healthcare technology management professionals with a unique, intimate, and rewarding conference second to none. You won't want to miss our 20th anniversary next year. Please visit mdexposhow.com for details. Let's give one lucky attendee the opportunity to win a Webinar Wednesday shirt by answering the following question. Cognosis's headquarters is located in what city and state? You can find the answer by visiting our sponsored website. Please use the questions feature on the GoToWebinar dashboard to submit your answer. As always, today's webinar is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI. You can obtain your certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. More details on this at the end of today's webinar. We'll wrap up today's presentation with a live Q&A. You can submit your questions at any time using the questions feature on the webinar dashboard. We'll get through as many attendee questions as time allows. As I mentioned earlier, our speaker today is Adrian Jennings. Adrian, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. As Jennifer explained, we're going to talk about the new generation of asset tracking and asset management system, which is kind of changing the story on return on investment. As for me, just a quick intro. I joined Cognosis here in just March as Chief Product Officer, but I've been in this asset tracking real-time location industry for 20 years, I'd say before there was an industry, actually. So what I want to try and bring you today is just some learnings from my 20 years in the industry, a little historical perspective, give you some insights to help you understand the differences between different technologies used in this space, and help you understand a little bit where the real ROI is for these systems. So we'll jump right in. If you don't mind, I'm just going to click off my webcam right now. I tend to walk around a bit when I'm talking, and that's going to be distracting. So let us start here. And we start here for two reasons. One is because all presentations should have cute puppies in them. But the other is that this makes an important point about what I call location intelligence, something that's just a little bit more than finding things. And it goes like this. If you had a new puppy and the puppy kept stealing your slippers, what would you do? Would you hire someone to find your slippers for you? Or would you train the puppy not to steal them in the first place? And it sounds like a silly question because, of course, you'd train the puppy and then your slippers would be always where you left them and there'd never be any doubt as to where they were, but that's actually not how things happen in the hospital industry or any industry, for example. The key here is that the value of asset tracking technology is not in tracking assets, as silly as that might sound, but it's really in making sure that they're always in the right place. If everything was always in the right place, there'd be no loss of assets, there'd be no searching. And that's the puppy paradigm that I want you to keep in your head through here, and I'll refer back to it on a number of occasions. And I'll use the term slipper finding. Slipper finding is the silly notion that the best way to solve problems is to alleviate symptoms, rather than puppy training, which is the best way to solve problems is actually to improve the process and solve the problem at the root cause. So we'll come back to that a few different times. So as I go through here, we're going to do this in a few chunks. We're going to start with a brief history of asset tracking technology, and I kind of subtitled this, How to Create Complex, Expensive Solutions Without a Clear Return on Investment, because that's kind of where the market's at right now. It's kind of stagnated a little bit as a result. I want to give you some insights into how to understand tracking technology. We're going to dive deep, but not too deep, but I want you to understand why RTLS vendors only tell you half the story about how to evaluate performance. And that's absolutely critical because the importance of room level accuracy is absolutely paramount. And it's paramount in elevating yourself above slipper finding. It's getting to the point of actually creating better processes. The discussion about room level accuracy kind of is going to naturally take us into the discussion of ROI, and we're going to talk about the actual ROI of solving problems, and then finally that'll give us all the background we need to understand and appreciate what this new generation of asset tracking technology is all about, and how artificial intelligence can lead to real insights. And I don't mean collecting gobs and gobs of data, this whole big data thing, push it all up in the cloud and let a machine learning engine have a look at it and see what it can discover. I don't mean that at all. I mean using AI to do better at finding things. I'll explain that. So let us start with a brief history of tracking technology then. And looking back, this is my kind of 20-year look in the rearview mirror. I see kind of four main epochs of asset tracking technology. And the first was, let's try everything. And then the second was, here's how we do this. And the third was kind of, yeah, that's not really cutting it. And now we're in the what about BLE epoch, BLE, Bluetooth, low energy. So the let's try anything phase, that was when anybody with any kind of technology was trying to figure out whether they could use it to create value in hospitals. And hospitals are hard places to make these things work. And poor old Wi-Fi didn't quite make it through that. Zigbee was another technology. Ultra-wideband was tried. We'll come back and talk about these for various reasons relating to either low value or high cost or both. But what stuck was infrared and ultrasound. And those are the things that kind of dominated the industry. They got a bit more complicated over the years, more and more complicated, in fact. And you'll understand the little subheading, keep the doors closed. If you don't already know what that means, you will as we go through these slides. The problem with those things is they didn't quite meet the performance level, and they certainly didn't meet the cost level to create a really solid return on investment. And so adoption, there's been adoption, but it's not exactly ubiquitous. A small fraction of hospitals have adopted this. And that brings us into this next generation phase. And there's a cautionary tale here, which we'll get into, which is that it's kind of splitting in two different directions. And I want you to leave this session a little bit armed to understand and not be misled in terms of what's going on with Bluetooth Low Energy. So let's talk about understanding tracking accuracy and this notion that RTLS vendors have really only been giving you half the story when it comes to performance. And the game of darts is a really good analogy here. I used to play darts as a child. I was pretty poor at it, but I played. And you could ask me, and you can ask me now, Adrian, can you score a bullseye? And my answer is, sure, I can score a bullseye. If you give me enough throws, I'll probably eventually get one. I mean, I'm bound to, right? But I kind of suck. My aim is not very good. I scatter darts all over the board. And the extent to which those darts scatter is the extent to which you can evaluate what kind of darts player I am. Clearly not that great. We certainly did miss the board as children, and much to our parents' dismay when we chipped big chunks out of the sheetrock. But let's have a look at scoring this. And if we count the number of hits that came within various rings, then we can start to be a bit more scientific about this. So in the bullseye, right in the middle here, I got 2. And in the next ring out, the ball, I got 12. And then the next ring out, within that ring there's a total of 69, including all these in here, right? 69 includes the 12, includes the 2. 92 within the outer ring, 97 on the board. Okay, so that's the count, that's the spread of what I did. And what we're going to do now is we're going to plot this on something called a cumulative error probability curve. And I promise this is as technical as we'll get, but this will give you some insight, some appreciation about how to really understand how these systems work. So what does a cumulative error probability curve look like? Well, on the bottom, we're going to plot error, how far off the bullseye I was. And up the side, we're going to plot how many red dots came within that error circle. So I'm going to put a little sliver of dartboard here for scale. And let's start plotting the results, right? So I got 2 in the bullseye, which is right here. So we can plot a number 2 right there. And then the next ring out is right here in the 25 points ring. I got 12, so we can plot that one. 69 here, and so on, 92 and 97 as we go out. And I can join those dots and plot a curve, and that red line is a cumulative error probability curve. And it tells you for any given error how likely I am to be better than that. Now, a professional darts player would look like this, right? They would have a much steeper curve. A professional darts player might get a bullseye more than 90% of the time and score that 25, almost 100% of the time. And as the curve moves up into that top left corner, the system's performing better and better. And in fact, a perfect player, right? A perfect player would score 0 error. They get a bullseye 100% of the time, which would be a line straight up, be that blue line drawn right up into the corner. And what that looks like on the dartboard is this, right? Just the spread of dots from a professional player is significantly concentrated because their aim is good. That's what's pushing them up into that corner. And this is exactly how you should evaluate location systems. If we go back to our CEP curve here, and along the bottom, we're going to plot how many feet of error, given that an object is here, and the tracking system puts a dot on a map to tell me where it is. How far is the dot from where the thing really is? And let's measure that in feet. And I plotted count over 100. Let's call that percentage. What percentage of the time are you going to come within that error? And what you get here is a notion of what's a better performing system, which is the blue one heading up into the corner, and a worse performing system, which is one that's kind of heading down and right, which has a much lower confidence level. And the thing about that top corner is traditionally these location systems achieved getting up in that corner to the best extent that they could with lots of infrastructure, and potentially infrastructure not just in easily accessible areas, but in patient rooms as well. And they became really rather costly from multiple different standpoints. One is just a lot of expensive equipment to deploy, but a really expensive and disruptive deployment process. Putting anything inside a patient room in the early days, lots of wired infrastructure, pulling Ethernet cables, everything that's anathema to deploying solutions in healthcare environments. So, this is one of those you get what you pay for kind of curves. The further up towards the blue line you wanted to get, the more expensive life would be. So why have RTLS vendors only been telling you half the story? Well, they want you to ask this question. They want you to ask, can you achieve a certain accuracy? They want you to look at the error axis. And 3 feet has become a magical number for reasons I won't bother to explain. But a lot of RFPs will ask for 3 feet of accuracy. And if you're the red vendor, the answer is, oh, yes, we can do 3 feet, but 35% confidence, 65% of the time will be worse than 3 feet, but we can do 3 feet. Even Adrian can get a bullseye if you give him enough throws. The blue company gives the same answer, yes, but with great confidence, almost 100% of the time. The pro player can really do that. And if you only focus on that axis, and that's where the industry has been trained to look, and you only ask the question, can you achieve 3 feet of accuracy, you get the answer yes from everybody. You ask me if I can hit a bullseye, the answer is yes. But I think you can see that the error number is meaningless without this confidence number. What percentage of the time are you achieving that accuracy? And you wouldn't want to buy the red system, right? I mean, these are extremes, obviously, to make a point, but gosh, some of them aren't very much better than the red line. So why do you care? Why do you care about the confidence level? Here's my terrible attempt at throwing darts, but if you made that the results from a location system, you might get something like this. There's a asset with a tag on it that's being tracked by a location system. And it could be any one of those red dots. And in fact, every time you ask the location system, where is my asset? It's going to return one of those red dots at random. And the next time you ask, it'll be a different one, and then a different one. And in fact, if you asked constantly and you watched the raw data, you'd see a single dot jumping around throughout that entire area, which is obviously very disconcerting to see. And I think we're all quite used to Google Maps, which does something else. It says, and we're not going to show you all those dots. We're going to say it's somewhere within this circle. They're going to put a dot in the middle to make us all feel happy and comfortable. But the real answer is we don't really know where it is, but it's in that circle. And just, as a matter of interest, the blue circle in Google is the 68% confidence level. It's the one standard deviation confidence interval. So when you look at your phone and it gets a little circle, what Google means is we think it's somewhere, you're somewhere in this circle, and we're 68% sure, meaning we're 32% you could be outside that somewhere. So that's what that is, just so you know. And so Google's being honest, right? They're actually plotting that confidence interval for you. Now, if your question is, where's the syringe pump? Well, it's somewhere up here in that circle. Well, that's great. You should be able to find that. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4 patient rooms, maybe some hallway, maybe a bit of stairwell. That shouldn't take long to search. In fact, a lot less time than searching the entire floor. So if your question is, where's the syringe pump? Then this will do it for you, just about, if people don't mind you opening a bunch of patient doors and peeking your head in the room. But I accuse you of slipper findery, and I hope at least some of you are familiar with Monty Python, the famous burn the witch scene here. But that's slipper finding. That is the lowest amount of value that you can possibly get out of an asset management system. Is where's my stuff? Where's my slipper? So let's move beyond the slipper. And let's start to think about training the puppy. Let's start to think about how do we improve our processes so that we don't have to find things. So imagine this situation. Here's a clean room in green and a soiled equipment room in orange, and a number of patient rooms. I've just put a few in yellow. And what if we want to ask the question, is the syringe pump available? We've started to become interested in utilization. We want to know how often we're using the equipment that we have. Is it 90% of the time? Is it 10% of the time? And to understand the process and how we're doing with utilization, we're going to ask a question like, is it available? Well, the answer is it's only available when it's in the clean room. But that level of error circle, and remember, a bunch of the dots are outside this too, it doesn't tell you the answer at all. You simply can't tell whether that asset is in the clean room, the soiled room, the hallway, or a patient room. And only in the clean room is the answer that syringe pump is available. So what you see is, as these error circles grow, as your confidence interval falls, the questions that you can answer become very limited. They're really limited to, where's my slipper? So that has naturally led us into the topic of room level accuracy and why it's important, and why near room level accuracy is just slipper finding. So the question I come back to is this: why is anything missing? Why does anybody have to search for anything? Shouldn't everything just be in the right place? And yes, that would be a perfect world. And of course, every hospital has a staff responsible for managing equipment, for maintaining and cleaning and distributing, and those guys do a great job with the tools that they have, and the tools that they have tend to be the experience of the ebb and flow of need in the hospital, a weekend versus a weekday, morning versus evening, and do a pretty good job at making sure that clean equipment is taken up and soiled equipment is brought back as best they can on a periodic basis. It's 3 o'clock, it's time to do a round. But wouldn't it be better if the clean room could just ask you when it needs to be replenished? Couldn't we automate that process? In a perfect world, when a nurse needs a piece of equipment, they would just simply go to the clean room. If you could guarantee that you would always find what you needed in that clean room, there'd be no searching for anything. And to guarantee what needs to be in there, you have to improve and automate the process of replenishment. So how would a clean room do that? Well, it needs to know what equipment is in it. So here's an example, green clean room and immediately next door, a soiled room, not uncommon. And they're perfect, right? Look at this. We've picked, even Adrian's dart throwing can all fit inside that green room. And so it doesn't matter which one of those dots, except for one maybe, gets returned by the tracking system, it's going to tell us it's in the clean room. And that works perfectly because, as we all know, everybody always stacks all of their equipment in the dead center of the room. Well, of course we don't. In fact, we tend to stack equipment right by the edges. Patient rooms is true, storage rooms, it's true. We tend to just push things back against the walls, maybe zip them on shelves, depending on the item. And as you can see here, the question about what spread of dots is adequate for telling you within your room has nothing to do with the shape and size of the room. It has everything to do with how thick the walls are. And trust me, there will be people who will tell you, oh, you have a 10-foot wide room. Well, we have 5-foot accuracy. That'll tell you whether you're in the room. Well, of course it won't, because when you're against the wall, the next room is less than a foot away. But here's the worst kind of mistake. The situation where a piece of soiled equipment is throwing dots in the clean room. Now, here am I, I'm the clean room, and I'm trying to get a count of how many syringe pumps, say, are in me. Because I know I'm supposed to have at least 10. And if it drops below 10, I've got to tell someone because I need some more. And what this is doing is it's increasing my count because soiled equipment next door looks like it's in the clean room. Very bad. And what you see is when you get these low confidence systems with a high spread of dots, that you cannot automate and optimize these processes. The only thing you can do is find your slippers because of this kind of contamination across rooms and hallways, as you can see here. Okay, so fine, so choose a better performing technology. Let's hire the pro dart player that threw the blue distribution. All of those dots are in the room, even when it's up against the wall. Problem solved. Well, the question then is, how often can you afford to be wrong? What's the spread? How many of those dots can be in the next room? And you have to pick a number. And this is why this chart is so important, because the business question is not how accurate should the system be. The business question could be, how often can I tolerate this automated process being wrong? And that is the vertical axis. So let us say you peg that at 95%. And the blue system can give you the location of an object to within, what is that? Maybe it was less than a foot, 95% of the time, fantastic. That'll tell you whether you're in the room, even up against the wall. The blue one, 95% confidence level is almost 12 feet, which is nonsensical for room level accuracy. So great, but remember, the blue system cost a lot more, prohibitively more. And history has shown that trying to go up into that corner is just cost more than it's saved. And that was the in the early days there, that was kind of the demise of ultra wideband technology, super precise technology, still in use today in different applications, but just too expensive to deploy in a hospital. Things like Wi-Fi and Zigbee, more on the red end of the scale, just a big spread of dots didn't really get you anything more than basic finding things. So that kind of gets us into this age of infrared and ultrasound, and how those things work was quite simple. Infrared and ultrasound simply doesn't penetrate walls. If you put a receiver in the room and a transmitter on a device, if the receiver can hear the device, well, then they must be in the same room by definition, because it's simply physically impossible to hear anything outside the room. Fantastic. Very high confidence, room level accuracy. The Holy Grail. But not really, for a couple of reasons. One is, that's an awful lot of infrastructure to deploy in patient rooms. And that becomes very costly in lots of different ways, financially costly and costly to the operation of the business. Tying up patient rooms, deploying equipment. The other reason is what happens if you open the door? And this is the keep the doors closed comment. If you open the door, those signals can quite happily pass through and out into the hallway. And there's all kinds of contamination of tags in hallways and rooms and so forth. So now they got even more complicated. And now we have to deploy and tweak and tune and twist and angle sensors at each doorway, which be a monitor whether something is entering or exiting a room. So they made it even more burdensome to deploy to accommodate the open doors. But even worse still, equipment's not always stored inside a closed room. There are lots and lots of cases where equipment is stored in wide open areas. And in this example here, right at the bottom there, we've got a nice corner where we can store some equipment. We've got a big open hallway just above that where we can stash some equipment. And that is very commonly done. And it's simply impossible to do that with these legacy technologies. So they suffered from that. They brought the room level accuracy at the expense of very expensive, hard to deploy, hard to maintain infrastructure, but only partially cover the areas you're interested in. So it still isn't useful for doing anything other than really slipper finding, because if you can't cover every place you store equipment, you simply can't get a view of where your assets are. So that's what led us to this kind of stasis, this epoch of where's the ROI, this somewhat stagnation of the industry where all the early adopters who wanted it had it, and the fast followers looked at it and said, I'm not really sure, it doesn't make financial sense. So let's dive in there. Let's have a look at the ROI of solving problems rather than alleviating symptoms. So a reminder here, different puppy, same message. And a reminder that the value of asset tracking technology is not in tracking assets, but in making sure they're always in the right place. So let's have a look at the ROI of the black statement, finding assets, versus the red statement, making sure they're always in the right place. And here are the widely talked about, widely documented, universally offered values of slipper finding. So a technology with a wide spread of red dots, they can tell you roughly where you are. You can basically find stuff, but that's about it. What is the value of those things? The value of those things is these, we are told. Nurse satisfaction, improved productivity. These are the big ones. And these are true, and they are important. What they are not is particularly measurable. How do you put a dollar value on satisfaction? So I call that a soft value, a soft ROI. It's soft because it's a little bit subjective, right? If you go to the CFO and say, I need, let's pick a number, $100,000 to spend on some technology, he wants to know how much money he's going to get back. And you tell him, well, we're going to go from 3 points of satisfaction to 3.5 points of satisfaction. And he doesn't really care. He wants to know the numbers. So you can go and dig up some white papers. There are many of them out there that will tell you how much percentage of nursing time is wasted because of the inability to find things when you need them. And I've seen numbers as high as 10%. Aha, they say, here's the dollar value. The dollar value of being able to find things faster is that you can save 10% of nurse payroll Well, how do you save 10% of nurse payroll? 10% fewer nurses? 10% less pay? Neither of those things are even remotely feasible. What would be great is if nurses could go home after a 12-hour shift rather than a 14-hour shift. That would be great. But again, the financial impact is not realizable. So beware the claims of giant savings in terms of productivity and satisfaction. They're either soft and optically measurable or measurable, but just not realizable in practice. You just never really get that money back. So let's look at the ROI of fixing the process. If you had this precise, high confidence ability to figure out which room or which virtual space in a hallway an object is in, you can do a lot of things. And at the bottom, you have some soft ROIs that are sometimes difficult to realize. But when you start working up the stack, you get to rental reduction and you start to hit something which is a very hard ROI. If you can better utilize the equipment you have, maybe you can rent less. That's a money savings. Tell the CFO. Device shrink. If you know precisely and with high confidence that something's about to walk out the door, either in, dirty laundry down the laundry chute or out the front door through for other reasons, then you can not have to replace those. Hallelujah, tell the CFO. But the big one, and the one that makes the biggest impact, is equipment utilization, which we've touched on here. Now, hospitals are notoriously poor at utilizing equipment for a very good reason, by the way. Intentionally poor, I should say, almost. There's several studies. This one quoted at the bottom here. The average utilization of mobile devices is 42%. So over half the time they're not getting used. Well, of course, part of the time they're getting cleaned and staged, but that's very low. And the reason is there's too much equipment in hospitals, and this is fairly commonly known, but this is quite a stark number. And the reason there's too much equipment in hospitals is that hospitals, unique to any industry, purchase equipment more or less on an anecdotal basis. It is almost impossible to argue when you hear that a nurse's inability to quickly find equipment puts patients at risk. It's impossible to argue with that. It's absolutely true. And the easy response is buy more stuff. The more stuff you have, the more likely it is that you'll be able to quickly find it. But the other way to do it is use your stuff more efficiently, which is what we're talking about. This is fixing the problem at root source. And our experience is that when you do that, you certainly don't eliminate 50% of your inventory, but we do find that hospitals have probably about 25% more mobile devices than they can really use based on their patient volume and mix. They just have 24% that is even feasibly possible to use, let alone is used. So there's a saving to be made here, and it's big, and it's hard. It can be enumerated, and it has a specific dollar value that's 100% realizable in reduced equipment inventories. So it's great. It's the exact kind of ROI we need. And it's the kind of ROI you get when you start thinking at a higher level than slipper finding. So here's an example. This is just a short period of time as an example, but this is real data from a hospital showing the total available count of IV controllers over a period. And if we look at the details here, over that period, the minimum number of available IV controllers was 298. At any given moment, there were 298 available controllers. Now, is that 298 too many? Well, no. Of course, you have to have float and buffer. Is it 200 too many? Maybe. It's at least 100 too many, right? That's where the hard savings is, in better utilizing the equipment that you have. So measuring utilization, we've talked about this. If you have a notion that available is defined by clean equipment available for deployment, and unavailable means equipment not available for deployment, then there's a location aspect to this, because available means in a room or area designated as clean storage, in the hallway, in the clean room, whatever it might be. If it is in there, it is available. Unavailable means the opposite. basically any procedural area, or maintenance or cleaning, which could be a patient room, could be the hallway or the parking lot, the way things have been for the last year or so. But if I need a very high confidence measure of that, if I get a low confidence measure of utilization and I act on inventory volume because of that, and it turns out the measurement was wrong just because the confidence level was low, then I can make a mistake. This needs to be high confidence stuff, 95% confident or higher, right? And what we're talking about is 95% or higher confidence of in-room location. So how do you, now you've figured out how much extra you're using, how do you use less equipment? Well, let's go back to the clean room replenishment. It is absolutely possible for a clean room to have a notion of what a minimum level of equipment is per asset type and a critical level. And it's perfectly possible for a soiled room to have a maximum level. As soon as I've got this number of things in me, someone needs to come and empty the soiled room. It's very easy to count as long as you know exactly which room everything's in. And the way we deliver this is, a battle board, which is a wall-mounted board that pops up a list of clean rooms that are screaming for inventory. And they might be kind of a yellow alert phase, which says, look, I'm getting a bit low, someone should come soon. And then maybe a red alert threshold that says, look, someone needs to come now, I'm really running low. You're in jeopardy of a nurse coming here and not finding what they want, right? And that's exactly the thing that we want to avoid. Of course, you can deliver that mobilely as well to ping people an alert when they need to get some equipment moved around. So this is what you can do. This is the process of fixing the problem and making sure everything is where it's supposed to be. So when ROI is a balance, right, about cost and value, and if we look at just simply in terms of high cost, low cost, and high value, low value, and remember the high value things we looked at were very hard as well. They were things you could specifically put a dollar value to and realize, and the low value stuff we looked at was kind of soft, hard to enumerate, and very difficult to actually realize in practice. And you can kind of throw the technologies on there. And this is just kind of rough to give you an idea of where they sit together. Poor old Wi-Fi there. At the bottom, wasn't particularly average, threw darts all over the place, so not that useful even for finding stuff, not even as cheap as it could have been. The notion was, hey, you already have Wi-Fi, why not use it for tracking? And what it turned out was that you had to put in a bunch more access points to make the tracking work. Zigbee kind of in the same corner, not terribly similar to Wi-Fi, kind of a precursor to Bluetooth in a lot of ways. Zigbee, the home automation buffs will know as the technology for home automation devices these days. There's ultra-wideband up there in the top left. Great value. I mean, yeah, super accurate. You can do all this stuff with ultra-wideband, but you can't afford it. I mean, you can afford it, of course you can, but it will never pay for itself. There's not a positive ROI. And so there's ultrasound and infrared, right? Sitting there, pretty decent value. They can do room level accuracy to an extent, right? They can only do it in closed rooms. Can't do it out in the hallway. They don't cover the entire floor. They're not as cheap as they could be. It's quite expensive. It's just complicated to deploy, complicated to maintain. So that's where they sit, and that's been the sweet spot in the industry. But what a sad sweet spot for an industry to be in down there, not quite getting into the high value and hovering between low and high cost. And then the question, of course, is what sits up in this corner up here. It's the holy grail corner, the low cost, high value solution, which creates the obvious ROI, which means that you're crazy not to buy it, right? So what sits up there? Well, obviously that leads me into the last piece, which is what's the state of the world today? We've talked a lot about these legacy kind of historical solutions, but what's going on today? Well, what's going on today is we're over in BLE land, right? Bluetooth Low Energy. And Bluetooth, boy, has it really come of age. It's everywhere. I guarantee every one of you has it sitting in your pocket or on your desk and in your earbuds and your earphones and all over the place. It's cheap. And it's not dissimilar in many ways from Wi-Fi and Zigbee. It's the same frequency. It's used in similar ways, slightly shorter range, we know, but but cheap. We like it because it's cheap. That's good. But it's kind of, there's this bifurcation of how BLE is being applied to asset tracking. And it's very important that you understand the difference between the two, because one of them is same old, same old. So if we look at our little value matrix, those two branches sit in these two squares. There's the bottom right corner, low cost, low value. Down where Zigbee was, Wi-Fi was down there. But hey, Bluetooth's pretty cheap. You know, maybe it doesn't do that much because the accuracy is not that great, but it sure doesn't cost very much. Maybe it makes a somewhat decent slipper finding solution. Okay. But in the top right corner, there's another way, and that's the new generation. And the bottom low value version is same old. It's dots on a map with a pretty decent spread. It's a red technology. It's no better than me at throwing darts. And the new way to do it is using artificial intelligence in a very interesting way that I'm going to tell you about after I've warned you about one thing, which is this. Suddenly, in the industry, there's this new marketing slogan. Room level accuracy has become the gold standard for all the reasons we just talked about. Everybody has known about what I've said for a while. Nobody's been able to really deliver it at the right price point, but everybody knows that high confidence room level accuracy is the gold standard that creates the most value. There are all kinds of Bluetooth systems in the world today coming out of the woodwork. They're pretty easy to make. You can buy the parts off the shelf, do a little software. You can make them work pretty well, pretty fast. And they're kind of coming up with this term near room level accuracy. Near room level, what the heck is near room level accuracy? So I'll tell you my view on that is near room level accuracy is the same as not room level accuracy. And it's the situation on the left, right? That's near room level accuracy. It's okay for finding your slippers. It's not okay for solving the problem. So I kind of challenge, I don't know if anybody is on the webinar or will see this, but I would love one of these companies who are promising near room level accuracy to publish their CEP curve. I'd love to know where it sits between the red and the blue there, because near is telling us something about the confidence axis. It's telling us room level accuracy some of the time, but how much of the time, guys? You have to tell us. 90%? That might work. 50%? That won't work. So be warned, near room level accuracy, a little bit of a ruse in my opinion. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about applying artificial intelligence to BLE, and this is kind of cool. And it's about classification. And look, I like pets, okay, what am I gonna say? So here's dogs and cats, and classification is all around us, all the time, image recognition, all those things. It's working on my phone right now. My photo album is automatically sorted into categories. Here's pictures of dog, here's a cat, here's a sunset, here's a monument, and it's doing that all using classification algorithms. And these are machine learning tools, and what you do is you feed a bunch of photos of cats into it, and you say, look, these are all cats. And you feed a bunch of pictures of dogs into them, and you tell it these are all dogs. And in that way, that's called supervised learning. In that way, it learns catness and dogness, right? Now you give it a random picture, you don't tell it what it is. You say, hey, what's this? And it says, okay, that picture, that's got a lot of dogness about it. I mean, like it's almost all dogness. That's a dog. And it'll do the same for cat. And it's pretty mature technology. It's a little bit shocking to me how well my little Android phone can recognize faces in photos and show me, here's all the pictures of your wife. It's pretty cool. It's mature technology. It's applied everywhere. It's not, until now, been applied to location systems. But how does it apply? Well, the answer is, it's looking for features. In that case, it's looking for visual features, you know, colors and shapes and pixels and shading and all those things. And another kind of feature in a tracking system is how well I can hear some of the infrastructure devices. Now, in these, you put a very sparse infrastructure, kind of on purpose. You just put sensors in the hallways, little pinger, little beacons, Bluetooth pingers. And you walk in a room and you train it, supervised learning. You say, hey, this is this is room 14. And you go walk around room 15, you say, hey, this is room 15. And you do that, and you do that one time, and it learns room 14ness and room 15ness. And you put a tag in on this floor, and you say, hey, algorithm, where is this? It says, oh, this feels just like room 14 when we learned it. We're in room 14, and that's how it works. Okay, it's fundamentally different. You can even do it in virtual rooms. It doesn't matter. There don't need to be walls. You just walk a little tag around and say, hey, this is the hallway storage area. This is the corner storage area. Just teach it, and it says, okay, I can classify that in my classification algorithm. And it's fundamentally different from the way that everything else is done. There are no coordinates. There are no dots. We don't do dots. There's no need for them. It's not what's on the left. Return one of those dots at random, whichever one you just happen to get. Figure out whether it's within the red dotted boundary, and if it is, tell me it's in that room. I call that pick a dot geofencing. And that's the traditional way to do things. It's the way it's always been done with all the technologies. It requires a lot of expensive to install infrastructure, both in and outside the patient rooms. It's not that. It is this, which is, it doesn't tell you where in the room. It doesn't put a dot. It doesn't do any of that stuff. It just says, oh, it's in room 14. Got 98% certainty. It's in there. Smells just like room 14. That's where it is. And you only need sparse infrastructure, and you only need to put it in the hallways. There's no going in and out of patient rooms installing infrastructure. So paradigm shift, I kind of hate that term, but I really think it applies. It creates a high value, high confidence room level accuracy, and it does it at low cost. Very sparse Bluetooth infrastructure, super cheap. And it fits right there up in that corner, right where we were looking for the solution. If you're going to put it on the timeline, you can divide this up to the part of history where they didn't have AI. The chunk of BLE new solutions which didn't consider AI just said, hey, let's do what we have always done using this cheaper hardware. And in the top right, the people like Cognosis didn't know better, who came into this recently, a few years back, and said, okay, from a clean slate, with the tools we have available to us today, what is the best way to figure out which room you're in a hospital? And the obvious answer was classification, when you're not weighed down by the baggage of the past. And if you put your little ROI matrix on there, that's the top right corner of low cost and high value. So that's it. That's the key. Is it's just a new way of doing things. It's applying tools that just weren't around when these other systems were invented, and it's doing better. So for the slipper finders, for the people who just want to alleviate symptoms, find the slipper when the puppy steals it, you either are looking at expensive disruptive infrastructure, which only covers key rooms. That's kind of the IR ultrasound story, or this fantastical new thing called near room level accuracy, which we don't really understand, but is kind of the Bluetooth scattering of red dots. And what you get is the soft and often unattainable value with a marginal return on investment. That's the status of the industry. However, if you elevate your thinking, you say, I'm not hiring a person to find my slippers. I'm going to train the puppy not to. I'm going to make my process as perfect as it can be, so that to the maximum extent that I can, everything is going to be in the right place. There's going to be no searching, because we just have to go look in the clean rooms, and there everything is. In this new paradigm with this new technology, all that requires is a pretty sparse distribution of beacons just along the hallways, and not even very carefully placed. Honestly, the less careful, the better. It helps the learning algorithm. That covers the entire building, everything. The rooms, the break areas, the nurses station, the closets, the whole thing, anywhere. And what you get is high confidence room and virtual space classification, which is unheard of. And you get that at the price point that really creates an ROI. It delivers those hard, easily attainable savings. It helps you reduce your fleet of assets to a more manageable size, more cost-effective size, more efficiently used, because you have these insights and a very fast time to value. Time to value can be as little as 3 months when this stuff is deployed. So a lot in there. I hope that was helpful. A little bit of insight, maybe a little bit of guidance on how to evaluate these solutions, and a little view there into what the new generation looks like, and finally getting to the point where we're creating these indisputable ROIs that make asset management solutions kind of a no-brainer. So that's it. Jennifer, happy to hand it back to you and see if we have any questions I can answer.
Great. Thank you, Adrian, so much for this presentation. As a reminder to the audience, if you have a question, you may use the questions feature on your webinar dashboard. We do have some questions that have come in, and the first one is, isn't machine learning just like fingerprinting technology from a few years ago?
Excellent question. Yes. Well, no, this is the answer. So fingerprinting, that was something that was done quite a lot with Wi-Fi back in the day, which it was a similar thing, but it was doing something a little bit different. It was trying to place a dot on a map by doing these RF surveys. And it had two problems, actually. One was still not that accurate. I mean, really quite poor, actually, in terms of the spread of red dots, because it was trying to create dots, right? So it had a pretty decent spread. But the other thing that was a problem back in those days was that those models quickly aged. If you moved some equipment around, maybe you reconfigure some furniture, or you put some new infrastructure up, something, every time you change something, that whole survey becomes out of date. And you had to go and do it again. So it was not that accurate, and a bunch of maintenance. But the way machine learning algorithms work is different. First of all, it's a classification problem. There's no dots, so it's much more reliable and accurate that way. But it also continually retrains itself as well. These machine learning algorithms, I mean, what they do is they learn and they continue to learn. So they cope with changes just automatically, which is a fantastic feature. It comes built in with the technology, and it means that the maintenance is, but there's no maintenance. I mean, it's continually kind of, topping itself up and re-optimizing itself as time goes on. So yeah, fundamentally different actually, but easily confused. It's a good question.
Great. Our next question is, what does the installation timeline for a solution like this?
So it depends which kind you pick, of course. And the two classes of easy to install versus complex to install is a matter of weeks on the easy side to several months on the complex side. And the several months comes from quite a lot of infrastructure that has to be deployed in difficult to access places. I mean, if you have to put something in patient rooms, then you just have to wait till those patient rooms are available to go in there, or close them down for a period of time to do the work, which is not a good thing to try to consider. So there's a lot of work to do, and it extends over a lot of time as well, just because it's quite disruptive. So for a more like a technology that I described here, more like a Cognosis kind of technology with just a few beacons in the hallways, you can do that in a few weeks. Installing the beacons is really a breeze. They just clip to the ceiling. They're battery operated. There's no wires. You just clip them up there and turn them on, and off they ping for the next several years. And there's no kind of surveying and calibration and tweaking and messing with those. And then the one thing you have to do is go through the learning phase. So you do have to kind of walk a tag around, and anybody who's going in and out of a patient room can do that. You just have a tag with you as you go in and do your thing, come back out again, and you've got that room learned. And so it overlays the normal process much more neatly, and you can get that done in a few weeks. Probably the most complicated part is just attaching, not complicated, but time consuming. It's just attaching tags to all the assets, because you're talking about many thousands. So yeah, so a few weeks if you go the kind of new Cognosis technology kind of route, the AI BLE kind of route, to several months if you go to the more traditional kind of solution.
All right, our next question is, what companies offer this technology?
So I assume when you say this technology, we're talking about kind of like the new way of doing things. So I mean, I'm not going to name names. I'll name our name, Cognosis. I mean, the reason, as far as I know, Cognosis is the only one doing this whole machine learning thing. Let me answer that way. That's kind of why, 20 years in this industry, I made a big career change to come work here, actually, because I kind of found out what was going on here and thought that this was pretty unique and really quite game changing. So as far as I know, only we are kind of taking that approach. There are other vendors in the space, obviously in the IR infrared realm, and an increasing number of what I would call kind of traditional approach BLE companies, the Picadot and Geofence BLE, any number of those. But yeah, the way I described with the machine learning, I think only we are doing it that way, actually.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Adrian, for your time today and for a great presentation. I would like to encourage everyone to visit today's sponsor to learn more about the services they provide to our industry. Please visit cognosis.com. A quick reminder that you can obtain your continuing education certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. The survey will be emailed to you 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. We'll be back soon with another webinar. Please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and for complimentary registration. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.